through the books, but it gets really quite hard, and there really are not enough type of decodable readers in Jolly Phonics. And thank goodness we do have publishers now who are producing more decodable readers, and they are very, very good, and they are very useful. And the skill will come with the teacher is choosing the right type of decodable for the right children. Certainly the more able ones will be able to romp through Jolly Readers very nicely, especially if they've picked up the language pretty well. But there are some children who don't go so quickly. They need to go through the same processes, but because they've got a poor memory, it takes them longer. Because they're not so natural to hearing the sounds and hearing the words, they take longer to develop a skill. The secret, if you have a child like this, is not to say, oh, they can't blend very well, I'll wait until they get a bit older. That's not the way to go. The secret is, because they're not very good at it, I need to do twice as much with them than the others. So what makes it decodable? Well, blending needs to be practiced until it becomes automatic. So what is automatic? Now you just think about driving the car, how awkward the gears are to start off with, and then one day after you have practiced enough, you automatically change them and you don't really think about it. That's automaticity. And the researchers say that any skill that is taken to automaticity will never be lost. Now that's what needs to happen with decoding. They need to get to that automatic stage so that it is never lost. We have had sometimes a good Jolly Phonics teacher in the first year doing a fine job. The majority are off and flying and doing nicely, but this little group that don't learn so quickly, they are still stumbling a bit. And then they go to another teacher who doesn't know about blending and sorting out the sounds and so on, and gives them reading books that aren't decodable, and those children almost stop it immediately. They just drop out of it because it never got to automaticity, they hadn't practiced enough, and as soon as it doesn't work, well, let's guess instead. And it starts a very bad habit of guessing what words might be. So we need to make sure that they get to that automatic stage. And one of the ways is through the decodables. With these books, if they reliably allow them to blend and get to the word without letting them down, then they've got a chance of getting it to this automaticity. And that's why it's so important to have this practice, and that's what the decodables give. They give the practice. And ironically, once they've got to that ability in English, reading Spanish and writing in Spanish hardly needs to be taught at all because they do it themselves. The code can be transferred to Spanish, because there's enough similarities in our codes, and yours is a darn sight easier than the English one. So by conquering the English one, Spanish is relatively very, very easy for them because they've got all the vocabulary. But again, you need to find out what makes it decodable. And next door with all those books, there are a lot of decodables there, and if you look carefully at the books, they often say either at the beginning or at the end what letter sounds have been taught and what tricky, awkward words are there as well. So you know what's in the book. And there's another program called Read, Write, Ink. It's a synthetic phonics program by Ruth Miskin, and a very good to get used to doing. Now, another thing you need to recognise as well is that for the children who are slow, children who find it difficult, there are some books that are even better. Well, they're a lot better than our Jolly Readers. The Jolly Readers go too fast for them. And the books that Now, these little books No, they don't have glossy covers, they don't have wonderful colours inside, but they are very clever little books. They have been worked out so that the progression is very, very, very slow, making sure that the children master the blending and knowing the sounds, and are well worth using for the children who are struggling. I like them because they have the story in pleasant language, so whoever is listening to them can read them the story, so they've got a good understanding, and you have to perhaps explain in Spanish. You have a good understanding of what it's about. The pictures provide humour and don't particularly help them to read the words, but help them to understand the story. And the words are cleverly written, so they are very similar. So you'll have characters like Mit and Mat. So they both start with a capital M, they're both in a T, but it's a middle vowel, and that's what you want in the children, to be very careful to look at every single letter when they're working out the words. And at the end we have comprehensions and little questions. And I've seen children who have got, that people will say, oh, they should be able to read all right because they've got a wide vocabulary and they have had parents who've read to them since they were babies, all the good things you're supposed to do, and yet they have had trouble with reading. If they haven't got that memory and they haven't got that ear and nobody teaches it well enough, and it's that bit of a struggle, and they give them reading books that aren't the right ones, they can struggle and then end up failing. So these are worth having a set of, so that you can make sure that discovery, if you remember I said about that school that did so well years ago. Now they measured and recorded all the findings from those schools, and the educational psychologist, Marlin Grant, has been measuring these children for a long time. And she found that she didn't have the decodables, and she wanted decodables. And because nobody had published any then, she and her colleagues started to write them themselves. So there are decodable books written by Sound Discovery, and mighty fine and good ones. When they introduced them, so at the end of the first year, instead of the children reading 12 months ahead, they were reading 17 months ahead. So it made a big difference. And those decodable books make that difference, particularly for that bottom group. It saves them and makes sure that they manage to get to the reading. And in the end, the ones who are a bit slow and hesitant, they gradually get faster. It just takes longer, but they go through the same process. And the secret is just to say, well, they need more. I must do more words. I must give them simpler books. And if you look next door, you'll be able to see them. And we're very, very lucky in Spain because Decodables International has been making sure that they can decode for reading and encode for writing. Very important. And there's so there's a list on the a smallish number and build up with the tricky words. In Jolly Phonics we teach the first 10, then the next 10 and so on, we build up. So it's very difficult to be able to see whether it's decodable. Magga George, you'll be alright.
What age do you start the grammar book with your students?
It was designed that they would learn to read and write with Jolly Phonics, the 4 and 5-year-olds, and then the 6 to 7-year-olds the next year.
Okay.
And then the year after, Grammar Handbook 2. So we've got 3 manuals really.
You spoke earlier about the different levels within the class. What do you do if you have new children that come in that that obviously is still working on the sounds?
Yes.
And you've got others that are really developed and progressed.
It's very difficult. There's never a magic to it, but in the end, you have to see what sounds they don't know. You have to go to that checklist. You have to see how good their blending is. And actually, when you see this word bank, you can develop little boxes of words So you perhaps find that they know the first 8 letter sounds, say, and then you teach them another one, and here's a box of words from that word bank. Now you can practice on here. Now's another sound, practice with these. So have your tools available, but there's no other route than to go and find where the problems are, what's missing in their letter knowledge, and how good their blending is. If it's poor, then you've got to just keep practicing with them until they do develop the skill.
In England,
sorry.
sorry.
The